Hi! Right, today you're making tomato and basil tart. Lots of skills in making this because you're going to be making your own pastry and you're going to be making your own filling for the tomato and basil tart. So the ingredients that you will need are 250 grams of plain flour, so that's my flour already weighed out. You will need 50 grams of lard. You will need 75 grams of hard margarine or butter. You will need a pinch of salt and you will need some cold water. And I'll explain why it needs to be cold for you in a minute. For the filling of the tart, you will need 125 millilitres of milk, 2 eggs, some grated cheddar cheese, 12 cherry tomatoes, a handful of fresh basil, and some salt and pepper to season. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to start with is the pastry. So I'm just going to move these to one side for now to make sure I've got a clear work surface to work with, and we'll work with the pastry. So here's your ingredients then: flour, lard, butter and cold water. Right, in your large bowl you're going to add in your flour and your salt. So my salt is already weighed out and mixed in with my flour. You're going to place the fat into the bowl, so that's the butter and the lard, and it's really important you try and keep these ingredients as cold as possible. Success to making good pastry is making sure you've got cold ingredients, cold water. It's good if you have cold hands, because what we don't want to do is warm up this butter, because then when you come to try and rolling this out, the pastry starts to crack and your pastry is not as successful as what you want it to be. So in your bowl you've got your flour, your lard, your butter. Using a round bladed knife you're going to chop those ingredients up. So again, we want to use minimal use of our hands at this point, because like I say, you don't want to be warming up these ingredients. So try and chop it up as small as you can. And then once you've chopped that fat up into small pieces, you can start using your hands to rub that fat into the flour. So you've used this technique before of rubbing in to make fine breadcrumbs. That's what you're going to do with this. So with your fingertips, rub that butter in and that lard in to create fine breadcrumbs. Now the reason for doing this is we want to minimize the amount of gluten in the flour. So when you made bread, you wanted to make sure you developed the gluten, because we wanted the bread dough to be stretchy and to help give the bread texture and to trap the air. This time when making pastry, we want very little gluten. Okay, so that's why we've used plain flour, not strong white flour like what we did with bread. And by rubbing the fat into the flour, what you're doing is coating the flour grains with the fat, and that's going to stop too much water being absorbed into the flour to stop gluten from developing. Because if we have too much gluten in the pastry, we will not get that really nice flaky crumbly texture that we want from short crust pastry. Alright, so you want to work quite quickly with this, so you're not warming up the fat, you're not warming up those ingredients. Don't crunch it, okay, remember it's rubbing in. Right, once you've done that, give your bowl a shake, okay, to try and get fine breadcrumbs. Any large lumps, just rub those in. Right, next you need to add in your water. And you want, again, really cold water, so run the tap to make sure it's at its coldest. And you're going to add 10 5 spoons of water. Now don't be tempted to add too much at once. We want to add little bits at a time. Okay, so that way we're not adding too much water, the pastry is not going to get too sticky. So don't be tempted just to add it all at once. 10 5 spoons. And we're going to mix it in halfway through. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, using a round bladed knife, mix that in, because you can always add more, but once the water's in, you can't take it away. Okay, let's add the rest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 10 5 spoons. Okay. So you might think, oh, that needs more water, but at this point do not be tempted to add any more in, okay? Right, next thing, what you're going to do is you're going to bring all of this together with your fingertips. So I want you to be pecking at it, all right? I want you to be getting your fingers like a little beak, and I want you to be pecking at this pastry. Again, don't be tempted to get your hands in because you're going to warm up that pastry. So with your pecking fingers, okay, I want you to peck at that to get larger lumps of pastry. Okay, so we're just trying to bring all this together into one large ball. So once you've got some big lumps in there now, then you can get your hand in and to bring it together into one large lump. Again, working quickly so we're not warming up your pastry ball, trying to keep it as cool as possible. So you should have then a bowl with no ingredients in there and a ball of pastry. Okay, right, remember, clean as you go. So any dirty pots you've finished on the dirty side of the work surface. Keeping your area as clean as possible. Okay, so there's your pastry. All right, we want to just knead it very lightly. We're not making bread dough, remember, this is pastry. So you just want to knead it lightly just to smooth it all out. So a little bit of flour on your work surface. And then very lightly knead this until it's smooth, okay? Don't overwork it. That's really important. You do not overwork the pastry because it will start to crack when you try and roll it out, and you start getting all holes in your pastry, which you do not want when you're making a quiche or a tart like what we're doing today. Right, once you've done that, the next important thing to do is let that pastry chill for a little bit. Okay? Everyone likes to have a bit of a relaxing moment, so does pastry. So we're going to let this chill in the fridge. We're going to wrap it in some cling film so it doesn't dry out. And you're going to let that chill in the fridge for at least 15 minutes. Okay, you can do it the night before if you want to. I'm going to let that chill now for 15 minutes in the fridge. The reason why we do that is because it allows the fat to re-solidify, okay, after handling it, because we warmed up that fat a little bit. All right, we want it to firm up again. So this is going to then make the pastry easier to work with, and it's going to relax the gluten strands. Okay, remember, we want the gluten strands to relax so that the pastry has that nice crumbly texture. So I'm just going to put that in the fridge, and I'm going to give my hands a wash and wipe down my work surface, and whilst that's in the fridge I can then start making the filling. Okay, so I'll come back to you once I've done that. Okay, welcome back. So I've had a bit of a tidy up, I've got a nice clean work area, and I'm ready now to make my filling. The pastry is still chilling in the fridge, and whilst that's chilling in the fridge, we can get on with making this filling. Alright, so the first thing then you want to do is to wash your cherry tomatoes, which I've already done for these ones here, and then you want to chop these in half. Remember, we're using the bridge and claw method, so hand like a bridge, okay, hold in the cherry tomato, knife under the bridge and cut that in half. Okay, remember your knife safety rules. Always hold the knife when walking with it down by the side, down by your side, making sure you're using the handle. You never hold it by the blade. When you come to wash up your knife, make sure you do not just put it in a bowl of hot soapy water and walk away, otherwise somebody could put their hand into the bowl and cut themselves. Use a washing up brush so your fingers are well away from the blade. Dry your knife with one swipe, and then place your knife back in the storage rack where it belongs safely. Okay, so remember knife safety rules. So I've chopped up my cherry tomatoes. You need to wash your basil, and then you can finally chop this up. So this is really fresh basil. So I picked this from my garden this morning, and it smells absolutely delicious. Okay, so you want to finely chop this. So I'm going to bunch it all together, and then with my knife finely chop your basil. The smell from this is delicious. Okay, so there's my basil finely chopped. You will need a small bowl for your eggs, so you're going to crack 2 eggs into your bowl. So 2 taps on the side of the bowl. Where it's broken, put your thumbs in and pull apart. Make sure the eggshells go straight into the bin. And the next one. If you get any eggshell in the bowl, rather than trying to take it out with a fork or a spoon, use another piece of the eggshell, which then will attract the bit that's fell into the bowl. So there's a little tip there for you as well. Okay, using a fork, we're going to whisk those eggs together. Now, there's some food science words here that I want you to take note of. When you are whisking eggs, what you're doing to the proteins is something called denaturing. Okay, so technical term of food science, you're denaturing the proteins. You're changing the shape of the proteins when you're whisking eggs. And then when the eggs will cook, when they all solidify and go hard, that's called coagulation. So all the egg proteins have changed shape and they are coagulating, they're sticking back together. Okay, so there's some key words there that I want you to take note of: denature and coagulate. Okay, so whisk the eggs in the small bowl. You can then add your milk, 125 millilitres. Remember, when weighing out milk in a jug, you place it on a flat surface, you let it settle, and you check with eye level to make sure it's the correct weight, the correct amount, 125 millilitres. And then that goes into your small bowl. Whisk all that together. And then you can season with a little bit of salt and pepper. So place it in your hand first so you know how much you're putting in. So a pinch of salt. And then some black pepper. Mix all that together. Alright, and then just leave all this to one side until your pastry has been chilling for 15 minutes. Okay, right, let's have a look at the pastry then. Okay, welcome back. Alright, my pastry has now been messed in the fridge, so we can start building everything up. Okay, so let's unwrap it from the cling film. Lightly flour your work surface. You don't want too much flour so it dries out your pastry, so just a little bit of flour to stop it from sticking. Alright, and a little bit on the top. And then you're going to roll this out. Now when rolling out pastry, you want to use short, sharp rolls, okay? Don't keep rolling it and rolling it, okay? So roll and turn, roll and turn, roll and turn. You're going to keep doing that. You want to try and keep it as circular as possible because it's going into a circular tin. Roll and turn. Again, that way you're not warming up that fat that's in the pastry, which will make your pastry crack. Okay, if it starts getting sticky, let's put a little bit of flour onto the surface and then carry on rolling and turning. So you should have perfect pastry like what I've got here. So you want to roll it to the size of your tin. So I'm just using one of these foil tins. Okay, I'm just going to place that on my pastry to see if it fits. Remember, it's got to go up the sides as well. Okay, so that should fit nicely. Alright, right, using your rolling pin, you are going to lift up your pastry like that and then place it onto your tray. And then carefully push the pastry into the sides of the tin. So just use your finger, make sure you don't get any holes in the pastry, all the way around until it fits nicely in the tin. Okay, so now you need to get a knife so you can trim the edges. So holding your pastry up like so, and using your knife, okay, nice and flat against the side of your tin, going to go around the edge to trim that pastry. Alright, so you should then have evenly placed pastry into your tin, like so. Right, let's start adding the fillings into this. So in your pastry, you're going to add in your grated cheese that I grated already, and put that in at the bottom. You're then going to add in your tomatoes. Okay, so place those in. Make sure they're evenly spaced out. And then you can add your basil. Okay, sprinkle over the basil. And then finally, going to pour over your egg and milk mixture. Remember, keep your area nice and tidy. So before I pour over the mixture, I'm going to place this on a baking tray so it's easier to handle. So this is my egg and milk mixture that we prepared earlier. Pour that all over the top. And you're going to cook this in a preheated oven that's been preheated on 190. You're going to cook that in a preheated oven then for 20 minutes. Remember, make sure you use oven gloves to put your tray into the oven, as well as using oven gloves to take it out. So this is going to go in the oven for 20 minutes. Okay, see you back here in 20 minutes. Okay, welcome back. So it's been 20 minutes and your tomato and basil tart should be ready. Remember, when taking things out of the oven, you are using oven gloves. Okay, so there you go. So who can remember the food science words I used earlier? What happens to the eggs as they start to set? What was that food science word called? Did anyone get it? It was coagulation and denaturation. So you can see now that the eggs have set. That means they denatured and they coagulated and all the proteins stuck back together. So there's my tomato and basil tart, completely finished. Okay, good luck. Bye.